All right, so I'm not sure if you guys were waiting with me, but Sam Seder had announced earlier, I want to say last week, that he was going on Timcast, and immediately I knew exactly what I was doing today. So let's watch a debate. But before we do that, real quick, just want to address something new. Went in for a haircut, got a consultation, and they said that I didn't even need a haircut because I was trying to get my my little part kind of. I was like, oh, is there anything I could do about this? Because I don't know, read a comment that made me start thinking that my hair was thinning. Yeah, the one that finally got to me. But yeah, actually, sure shit. I just actually have a different natural colic. So there it is. Also, I can tell you right now that I'm going to be doing a lot of this. So if you thought that my little, butt head was distracting, it's about to get a lot more distracting with me just constantly doing this because it is definitely a adjustment for where my hair sits. So, but yeah, as riveting as this hair conversation is, let's get to this debate because I've been waiting for this for way too long. So,
Sam Seder, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
That's a good one. I like it. He's got his own beanie.
That's right.
20 years?
What's that?
20 years? Is that
20-year anniversary? This is actually a gift for you.
Oh, right on.
There you go.
Yeah. I'll put it on the shelf. See all like the weird knickknacks that I have?
Yeah. Well, that's actually for your baby.
Oh, thank you very much.
Congratulations. I understand that you're expecting. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nervous.
I hope you're getting sleep.
Oh, I think I got 6 hours tonight.
Well, I'm saying, is your baby born already?
No.
Oh,
Coming soon.
I'm talking about when your child comes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, what little sleep I already get probably will be less.
All right. Well, there you go.
Right on, man. So we'll start light. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, the election is Tuesday, but people are already voting.
No, wait. We got to talk about what am I doing here?
Sure. I was going to start light, but you can go with whatever you want.
No, I mean, it's light to me. But like, what? I thought I was banned. Didn't you say I was banned?
Yeah. Automatically, he's like,
blacklisted?
Maybe. I don't know the specifics. You have to. There's something to that effect.
Well, I can send you a link. But I teed it up here.
It's hard for me to remember verbatim everything I said, but
let's see what do we got here?
I would say
he's been doing this too long.
Oh, I mean, you pretty specifically banned.
Did I say no Sam Seder at all?
Well, I think so. Here, wait a second.
Trouble. Sam Seder's blacklisted by a lot of podcasts.
Yeah. Did I say us?
I'm not exaggerating. This is not a joke. Yes, there are many large podcasts that have outright said they will never work with him. It has nothing to do with being afraid to debate him. Sam Seder's off the list. This guy is...
there it is. I was about to say, I'm like, wait, he's just talking about other podcasts. Nope, there it is.
Lying con man. So
I mean, that's pretty strong stuff.
My confusion comes from, did I say I would never have you
I
on?
don't have anything to do with him. And that's why Sam Seder makes all these videos, and he focuses on drama. I mean, the man's obsession with Dave Rubin is laughable.
I agree with that to this day.
Oh, no, I actually, I have a
Did I say
real reason for that.
Did I say,
yeah,
did
of course.
I would never bring you on?
Oh, yeah, you did.
Okay, I might have.
I don't know if I have that specific video teed up. I might, though.
I may have. I usually, if I get like heated or something, but I tend not to be as definitive on things like this.
Well, it wasn't just that one time, too. When you went on Patrick Bet-David's show, you said the same thing.
Well, but it's true.
Dude, he's got so many examples.
There are a lot of big shows that have blacklisted you.
Oh, I have no doubt.
It's not about you, nobody wanting to debate you. I mean, the first thing I asked was like, let's talk about the issues, and you immediately pulled up drama. It's
not drama. I mean, I think everybody wants to know. It's like a weird...
No, because this is like a series of things. If you can't admit that this is something that, we're all interested in. This is the whole reason we're here.
I used to be a scriptwriter, and if you put a loaded gun in the first scene and you don't resolve it, people are going to be distracted. So this way we can just deal with this, get that out of the way, and then move on to stuff that is more, I think, like substantive.
Yeah. But that's it, right? It's not my business to tell other shows that have brought it up. But
I'm not concerned about other shows. I know what. I'm just curious. What am I doing here?
What are you doing here?
Yeah,
he's got one of those little hover UFOs. You see this? Yeah, these things are cool. Somebody actually made a really cool one where it's the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
I don't know. I figured there were probably misconceptions you had about me. I think that a lot of what you think about what I say comes from clips and not the actual show. So there's like...
I don't really have conceptions of you.
This started because you said something that was untrue about my position on the death penalty. And I was like, I think Sam saw a clip that someone pulled out of context and didn't actually hear like my 2-hour diatribe on
yeah, no, I don't. I think actually what I was talking about. I don't think I ever said whether you believe in the death penalty or not. I mean,
You cited a quote where you said that I said something like,
I cited a quote, or did I play a
stated
video?
at the beginning of a video, Tim Pool agrees that people who commit treason should get the death penalty, which
What?
is
Is that right? Do you have the video? You must have the video. No? Oh, wait a second.
and that
No, he's just as bad as Tim Pool in that regard of not remembering.
and I just went, holy crap. And
Let me see if I got it, because I'm pretty sure I remember this. It was in the context of you suing Kamala Harris,
And so
and
here-
you
here's
were
the
on
issue.
with Laura Loomer.
Right.
And you said the words,
Here we go.
people who get the death penalty, people who commit treason should get the death penalty.
What's the context of that sentence?
What's the context of that sentence?
So there's a clip that's 5 seconds long.
Oh, no, but I watched the whole rest of it. Like, I know you went back and forth, but it was so weird because you should really, if you can find this and put this up, because what I found fascinating about it was that you literally did say on multiple times in that going back and forth, because apparently what happened is you got in trouble at one point with, I don't know, some streaming service about people calling for the death penalty or whatever it was. I don't know the background of that.
YouTube says you can't call for the death penalty as a legal mechanism.
Okay. And so she brought up, I think these people committed treason. They should get the death penalty. And you said,
I don't know if she said, I think
well,
she
I don't
said-
care what she said, really, for this sake. But I'm quite sure you said, if you commit treason, you should get the death penalty. Right now,
what words are you missing from that sentence? Because it sounds like you just heard a clip.
No. I watched the whole thing.
Okay, well then,
and
why
then
are you-
at one point afterwards,
okay,
you
so let's
said,
pause. We'll break this down. We'll break this down.
Sure.
Is it currently codified in law that if you commit treason, you are out? The penalty is death.
What do you mean by codified?
Like, is U.S. law states that the penalty for treason is death?
Not necessarily, but it is one.
It is right. The penalty for treason is death.
What is the penalty for murder?
It varies. It can
Right.
be-
It can be the
Yeah.
death penalty.
No.
Exactly.
So it's the exact same
it's the
dynamic
same
as
thing.
treason.
Yes. So if we're talking about, in that context, people levying war against the United States, to which I said, I don't believe any of these people committed treason.
Correct.
Sedition would be trying to undermine or cause damage to the government.
Correct. That's
Treason-
not the issue.
Right. And so the context of that conversation is one, I don't agree with the death penalty. And in no circumstances, I
But you
routinely-
did say the words, if you committed treason, you should get the death penalty.
Okay.
That's also showing his inconsistency in his morals.
So once again, do you not understand?
Would you agree if someone commits murder that they should get the death penalty?
No.
I agree with
then-
that.
Right. And
But you did say
So-
if they
so-
commit treason, they should get the death penalty.
Yeah, it gets
so if
heated,
we're
Sam.
talking about the penalty for levying war against a country, whether you want it to or not, if a judge sentences someone to death, should they get the death penalty?
If a judge, I don't think people should get the death penalty under any circumstances.
If someone is shooting at another person, should they be shot at and killed?
If someone's shooting at another person, should they be shot at
Yeah.
and killed?
If someone is committing an act of violence and actively, is it within the legal rights of a person to return with lethal force?
You mean self-defense?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, whether you want it to or not, if someone robs a liquor store, should they go to jail?
Should they go to jail?
Under the current laws, regardless of your opinions, should the police arrest the person?
Yeah.
Should the people arrest the person for robbing a liquor store?
Yes. This is don't play that Gish Gallop crap. Come on, man.
I mean, I think they should, yes.
Yeah.
You think in literally every single circumstance, then, no matter what happens, if someone commits a robbery, they should be arrested?
I mean, I suppose there could be extenuating circumstances, but yes, if you commit a crime, you should be arrested.
So the clarification that I'm trying to make, it's not about, I don't think there's any real reason to try and go back and parse semantics. The concept was, if people are levying war against the United States, such as we're on the battlefield somewhere in Iraq or whatever, right?
Wait, this whole thing was about treason where you were saying that...
Do you want me to explain the ideas, or do you want to just go in circles? I don't understand.
Well, I want you just to address what I'm talking about
trying
instead
to.
of talking
You
about
interrupted me.
war. All right, go ahead, please.
Treason is levying war
Treason is levying war?
or providing aid to the enemy of the United States in a time of war.
Well, it also, you can be, I mean, there's been people who have been charged with treason when we're not in an active war, but yes, I guess. I mean, but however you want to parse this, treason is a legal charge against somebody, and there are multiple
Edward Snowden, was he ever actually charged?
potential penalties for that, one of which includes capital punishment. And
Just for the sake of clarity, because in the show we're not talking about specifics of someone may or may not be wrongly charged. If you're asking me why I would say something like should be, it's rooted in this: treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses of the same overt act or confession in open court. So the issue at hand.
No, apparently he was not charged with treason. They tried to, and they were not able to find that he had committed anything that remotely approached treasonous activities.
Hand was when we were talking, and I said, I don't think any of these people committed treason. I don't think anything they've done is worthy of death. I don't agree with the death penalty. The return is, but what if they're levying war against us? And then someone decides their life should be forfeit.
I watched that video, and in fact, I remember this now, actually. We were going over the ridiculousness of your lawsuit, and I said, you know, Tim says he doesn't agree with the death penalty. That's fine. And then they played more where you say, if you've committed treason, you should get the death penalty. I mean, and the interesting thing is, then I watched, hold on, let me finish. And
do you
then,
want to do a drama circle jerk, or do you want to actually talk about the ideas of the death penalty and what should or should not happen?
no, I think that I personally am against the death penalty. I think
So let's
you
talk
are
about
maybe against the death penalty.
I love how he says drama circle jerk, but he engages in the drama just as much. Like, he wants to pretend that he's like so above it, but he's not.
100% against death penalty.
But what I found fascinating, it was as if you watch that video as it goes further along, and maybe you can release it. I don't know if it's behind a paywall or what. I watched it somewhere, so I know it exists. Maybe it was on Rumble. And if you go along, it's almost like you catch yourself and you realize, like, wait a second, I'm against the death penalty. So no, you shouldn't get capital punishment. And that's one of the things that I think, like, in terms of like that, I've always found fascinating about you. And that there was actually a great video by Timba Toast on how you vacillate between different political ideas as a way of like maintaining a certain brand.
What is the brand?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you think the brand is, but
Here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. You know, if I post a joke on X that is like over the top, for instance, I tweeted Kamala Harris is like Hitler and Stalin times 200, and she's going to start 800 wars. That was actually written about in various liberal outlets as if it was a fact statement. And so I'm sitting here being like, can they not tell? Well, there's Poe's law. I get it. Sometimes they don't. But the issue at hand right now is just semantics.
Yeah, it's also the fact that you're not exactly known for your great comedy bits.
So instead of saying like, well,
dude, we're in the communication business. Like, our words are important. Now, listen, I certainly understand people misinterpreting a tweet. Believe me, I've been there.
I will just say this for the sake of clarity. Right now, regardless of my opinions on law, should the law be that someone would receive the death penalty, then they should receive it. I oppose it.
But it doesn't necessarily, the treason, the punishment for treason is not necessarily the death penalty any
we're
more than it is with murder.
All right, so let's just try and...
Why would you ever say, if you're against
this
death
is once
penalty...
again misconception I'm trying to get past, so let me explain.
Okay.
In the circumstance where someone has committed a death-worthy trespass, I oppose the death penalty. I would advocate against it. We recently had a big case where there were two instances where people were put to death. One guy, the family even said it shouldn't happen. They had cut a deal with the prosecutor, and it still happened. And that was, I believe it was, who was that? That was Missouri.
Missouri. Yeah, it's always Missouri.
And a lot of people watch my show were quite outraged.
I don't know why, but St. Louis and like the entire state of Missouri, they are the worst when it comes to putting people to death just because they have people in power that don't want to look bad.
That a family would say no.
Or keeping people in jail that have been proven innocent, you know, like there's a great case about a guy that got charged with creating like a little floodway to, I guess, like flood all these farms. But it turned out that he didn't do that at all. They just put it on him because he was like a local nuisance. And it turned out that the two farms were doing it for the insurance payouts. So allegedly, they kind of have more evidence pointing towards these people doing it and then putting the onus on him. But you have a judge that's already committed to the whole thing, and he's just like, nope, I don't believe that we made a mistake here.
Issue at hand is I don't assert myself over the rest of the country in law, which means if the mechanism of the courts is as such, that's what should happen. I will fight against it. That's the semantic misunderstanding.
Oh, all right.
Let's just put it like this.
Because you were so offended. I mean, the reason why I thought I was here was because you were so offended that I said you were against the death penalty.
You said I was for it.
Every time I see his little
I
YouTube plaque down there, it kind of looks like a toilet.
I got confused when you said
you guys can't see it.
Someone should get the death penalty
Under a mechanism
for
of
treason.
law that I oppose.
Well, you never said those words.
But that was the whole conversation.
No, actually, it wasn't.
Literally was.
We can play it.
But I mean, look.
Yeah, I can't wait to be, well, if I ever get to that point where I just get to casually just leave it on the floor in the back, I'll put it up later.
How about we just, instead of going back and forth and saying it was this show where these things said, we lay it on the table, there it is.
Okay, there.
Death penalty should be opposed.
We agree on that.
The government is a failed arbiter of who should live or die. This mechanism doesn't work at an institutional level.
I don't know that anybody is a arbiter of who should live or die, but yes.
Excuse me. There is some context that is more challenging, such as if a man pointed a weapon at your children, would you decide that he should die?
I mean, if someone pointed a weapon at my children, I would attempt to do whatever I needed to do to stop them. But that's different than
including lethal force.
I mean, if that's what it took, of course.
So that is you making the decision that you will take action which may lead to the death of an individual.
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah, but that's not capital punishment. Like I understand his argument here, but that it goes outside where it's like, yeah, but this isn't the government making the decision. This is a lot different because. Also, just like in the heat of the moment type of thing, it's a lot easier actually to make that decision where you're just like, okay, I do feel threatened. This is why they have the laws that they do about self-defense. But again, capital punishment being where it's just like, okay, we need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, or it should be a shadow of a doubt, but it's reasonable doubt that this guy committed the crime, and therefore, I'm with Sam and actually Tim, ironically, on this, where I think that capital punishment is just absurd and there's no need for it in 2024.
I would suffer the consequences, but I don't believe in general that that in capital punishment. I mean, that's not capital punishment. That's
I agree. I'm just saying
self-defense or
in certain circumstances, a person will decide someone may be about to die. And there's other.
I mean, this would make more sense if he was questioning pacifism or something like that, because like if I was debating pacifism with him, I would actually have to capitulate there and just be like, yeah, as much as I am a pacifist, I do think that, unfortunately, self-defense is a totally different thing. And it is also like insane to think that just because you're a pacifist, you totally give up your right to self-defense.
There's other issues, of course, like whether to render medical aid is a different circumstance. If someone is already dying, then there's if someone is in peril but you can't save them. But in terms of a human being making an active decision to end someone's life, there are many circumstances where someone will decide that they are the arbiter of that decision. Police officers do it every day. Soldiers do it every day, and often regular people. We have the Penny trial in New York right now, where they've got the trial going on for the Daniel Penny in New York, where he put that guy in the chokehold and the guy died. He made that decision at that point.
He killed the guy.
He did, and he made that decision for whatever reason. I am going to apply this technique to this man. May result in death. So at a certain point, someone makes that choice.
Yeah, and that's where the other guy goes to prison, because you don't get to just see, that's where I think Tim is wrong in this, because it doesn't always just fall to be like, oh, it was self-defense, this guy is totally innocent. No. You could argue that there is, yes, like if somebody points a gun at you and you have a gun, and you fire that gun and you kill them, that's a lot different than you having a perceived threat where the guy might have a knife and then you shoot the guy because he made a lunging gesture, but then it turns out it was his phone.
Question then is, do we agree that the choice was necessary or that they were backed into a corner? And that's a difficult decision. So I would just put it this way. I think in a perfect world...
This has nothing to do with capital punishment.
Yeah, it says absolutely. Like, again, what did this have to do with any of this? And like, how did he think that this made him sound any better?
It's about whether someone chooses someone else should die.
Right, but that has nothing to do with capital punishment.
Yeah.
They share
capital punishment is
they
definitionally
a
punishment that is put out by the government, as opposed to, an individual's decision as to whether or not they're going to apply lethal force to somebody. It has nothing to do with it.
I have not watched this, guys. I swear to God.
You would never say Penny provided capital punishment to that guy on the subway, because
anyone was making that argument.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with capital punishment.
Just in the sense that someone's making a decision over someone's death. And the question being, in the case of self-defense, I agree there are circumstances. And in the case of capital punishment, I agree there are no circumstances.
Okay.
I don't believe there's a reality where the government has successfully subdued an individual who they are no longer a threat, and then they just decide 20 years later, now let's kill the person. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do not believe that we should have capital punishment. I do not believe in the death penalty.
How do we stop it?
Well, I mean, there have been times in the past where we've come close, I think. Sadly, I think because of all of the ginned up stuff about crime in this country over the past couple of years, I think we're moving in the wrong direction. I think the Democrats actually took it out of their platform this year. They're against the capital punishment. It is a problem. There is a cost associated with the attempts to scare people about crime in this country, and that's one of the costs, that we move further away from some type of positive public policy.
4% of death row inmates are likely innocent. And that means at an institutional level, people in this country accept 4 in 100 people will be murdered by the state, unjustly killed, for
just to make sure those 100 go down.
I reject that outright.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I mean, I think both.
Really weird that we're kind of going in circles with something that you guys both agree on. That I think that everybody in these, like the two audiences, agree on this
in terms of efficacy, but even in terms of, I think, if you feel that there is a situation wherein, without a threat to anybody, right? I mean, these people are all in jail, that there is a justification to kill someone in cold blood, then I think it just becomes a negotiation as to when it's not.
You know what really gets me too is what I hear from a lot of people is, what about when you know? You've seen on video they're harming a child or they're doing something. And it's funny because in a circumstance where an individual literally witnesses a crime happening, it's easy to say, sure, we can, like if you're out in public and you see someone committing an egregious crime that is going to cause great bodily harm or death. But why does that justify an institutional, national level mechanism by which the government can decide that someone dies? I think it comes down to 12 people walk into a room, someone they've never met before points to a person they've never met and they say, trust me, kill him. And these people are like, well, I guess. I think that's insanity.
No, I agree. I mean, you brought up the penny thing. And I think that's why it's even that much more egregious, in my opinion, his killing of that man, because I don't believe in that situation there was any type of threat that justified holding this guy in a chokehold for that many minutes.
No, and every witness on the subway said the same thing, where they were just like, no, he was subdued. He was already...
At all, frankly, for that matter.
What do you think, like, the penalty should be? Like, do you think, like, they're charging him, I think, with negligent... Is it negligent homicide?
Negligent homicide, yeah.
At the very least, I would imagine manslaughter. But, in generally, as a rule, I don't really parse out court cases. I mean, if there's a charge, as a matter of public policy, there are instances where I think that people should be charged. But beyond that, then I just, I didn't even watch the OJ trial.
I'm curious about your thoughts on this story. This is from NBC News from 2021.
He's so into legalese and just the legal stuff. I'm surprised that he didn't.
Police say riders didn't help women raped on train because of the bystander effect. Explain why. Does the bystander effect explain why? Philadelphia police said riders did not call 911, instead held their cell phones up in direction of the assault.
Well, that's just, I think that's more of a comment on humanity and where we've all gone.
No, in a circumstance like this was a huge story. 40 minutes, a woman was harassed by a stranger on a public train and then raped while bystanders just watched. What would you do? Like, what do you think a person should do in a circumstance like that?
At the very least, I would call 911.
That's great. Yeah, right. No one did.
That's absolutely nuts. Like, what the hell, New York?
Over the course of 40 minutes, I'm not familiar with this story, but if I watched someone being assaulted,
raped,
and then or raped, yes, I would intervene. I would push that person away. I would attempt to stop them from raping that person.
I think.
Yeah, you ever seen the video of the guy that was causing a scene on the bus, and he started pushing this guy? And then somebody tried to stand up for him, and he was immediately stabbed, and I think 2 other people also got killed.
Anybody should.
What has that got to do with this?
Well,
not saying that this is not a reason to jump in, but I am just.
We've got 2 extremes, I suppose, right? With Neely, you've got a woman who said that she felt like her life was in danger. As one of the witnesses.
Well, we've seen that. I mean, there are people all around there, and the idea that she.
That's actually the thing about the witnesses with the videos. We have the video.
Felt like her life was in danger. I mean, she's not communicating that to the guy, to Neely. B,
she said
it was quite clear. It was quite clear that, I don't know, minute 2, minute 3, minute 4, that this person is not going to end up killing that person. I would imagine that if this guy attempted to assault her anymore, Neely could have pushed him away, or they could have held him down. But a chokehold is a lethal thing, and he held it for minutes.
Do you think that you would wait until the woman was being raped before you would intervene?
Probably not.
But how would you know then if the guy is like a threat?
The fact that she's saying, no, get off me is kind of the thing.
Unless he's actively committing harm.
Well, I mean, if he's actively committing harm, there's I would assume, I'm not familiar with that story, but I would assume that it would start out where the guy is physically assaulting her, holding her down or whatnot. And I think at that point I would go and intervene. But I think the problem in this instance, and again, the guy's been charged. That's basically where my interest, I move on to other things. But in an instance where you're putting someone in a chokehold, which again, he's trained. He's a
Marine, right?
Yeah, he must know this is a lethal thing. You're putting someone in a chokehold for 5 or 6 minutes. I think that's a problem.
I took self-defense courses and they teach you that like the second day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have no idea. I see both stories and it seems like they're both on the ends, right? Jordan Neely didn't do anything. People may have claimed they have felt threatened. In this regard, it's a woman who was quite literally raped. In one instance, you have intervention.
People aren't even calling 911. I mean, I don't know what's
insane.
going on there. Yeah, that's absurd.
I know, it's a crazy story.
That's crazy.
I don't think you have to have too nimble or nuanced of a brain to say there's a difference between watching someone get raped and not calling 911 and putting someone in a chokehold for 6 minutes. I feel like there's a...
You can at least call 911.
Yeah, these are pretty wide disparities. This is not...
That's what I mean, like on the extreme ends.
Right.
You get these stories where it's no intervention to the extreme degree and then intervention to a person's death.
Right.
And it's like maybe we don't see the stories of any kind of in between because they're not sensational, right? Like I'm sure something happened on a train recently in New York where someone, like the guy was getting violent, he got shoved, everything stopped. You know what I mean? No one, NBC News is never going to carry the story.
No.
Well, yeah, that's probably a daily occurrence. I mean, dude, just riding the L, that's... You know how many times I've seen a guy just piss like on the L? Nobody says, like, there are some things where collectively we'd just rather not get involved in. Sometimes it is just better to let, the crazies be crazy.
Extreme about it. And so we only ever get these edge cases which put people on one side or the other.
Yeah, I mean...
Unless they get violent.
Stuff happens in the subway all the time.
Yeah.
New York's been getting pretty wild. I suppose it's relative to the amount of crime, but...
Been getting wild in what way?
There were, I think, last year, like 25 people were pushed in front of trains?
I mean, I can tell you that crime in New York City is, down still around historic lows. I mean, yeah. I'm old, so I remember New York in the late 80s. And, it's...
Wow.
It's like
3 years ago. Sorry, I was wrong. Yeah, it was in 2022, I think it was.
Oh, well, I mean, listen, during COVID, we had a once-in-a-lifetime...
and people were losing their collective shit, let's be honest.
Event, hopefully, knock on wood.
We still are.
And a lot of things got messed up, but crime is back down. The only crime that has gone up, which is fascinating, and for all of the
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
BS that we heard over the past couple of years
retail theft
about, shoplifting and smash and grab and all that.
Yeah.
Do you know what the one major crime that is up? The most statistically? It's actually shoplifting. Shoplifting went up in 2023, and it is now because it went down during COVID. So as much as we heard, and I know you've talked about this quite a bit, and I think it's been misrepresented in a lot of respects, that all of the shoplifting was up and people are gone mayhem. It's crazy. It was actually below where it was in 2019, and it is now back up to where it was in 2019.
I think,
and because COVID was, screwed up with our society so much. But again, you ask me, why are we going the wrong direction with capital punishment? I would say it is the absolute BS that has been shoveled. I don't watch your show enough to know, although I've seen people on here who, when Emma was on, who promote this idea that there was like this explosion of crime. And in fact, what ends up happening is that, yes, during COVID, there was a spike. And now we're back down. And the only thing that is back at 2019 levels is actually shoplifting, because it had gone down and it's gone back up because we're back to normal.
So,
yeah, it's all, I mean...
So I'm trying to pull up the Marshall Project. This is a good one. So we had these, this was the story that happened, and this is what's a cause for contention. The FBI released crime data showing that crime had gone down. And, during the presidential debates, David Muir fact-checked Donald Trump saying, actually, crime is down. However, recently, the FBI released new crime data showing that actually it was up. It was up, I believe, 4.5%.
When? What year?
The year prior, 2021.
That it was up.
Yeah. So the latest data that we have.
But we knew. No, it was actually 2022. We knew. We knew. Yeah, it was 2022.
I'm sorry, the increase from 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during COVID, in the wake of COVID, 2022 was up because the data reporting was not complete. But if you look at 2023 data, which is now they have got enough of the police departments online that 94 point something of the country is covered, you will find that crime is down in 2023.
So do you think? I think one of the issues,
even in Chirac, the way that people always try to be like, oh. You know how many times I've met somebody that, like, when they find out that I'm from Chicago, they like it is like, I saw a video making fun of this where it's like when somebody finds out that you're from Chicago, oh, it's so dangerous. How do you get around? It's like, my car and walk.
We had a rise because of COVID, and now it's dropping back down. But again, let's also be clear on this. If you compare 1990 crime with today, it's basically like this. It's just straight down on that.
You want to know something interesting? You know what one of the biggest factors in the decline in murder is? Cell phones. So back in the day, in the 90s, if somebody got stabbed, somebody had to run to a payphone to try and call 911, and that created a massive gap between first responders.
Well, it's also, like having cameras
And medical treatment. And so around the time cell phones came out, you see a massive drop in murder charges and homicides. People immediately started thinking like, wow, crime is down. And it's like, well, no, look at the crime data. It is down. It is going down, but it's not the same. There's a decline in crime and a sharp decline in murder because now people were instantly calling 911 and first responders were arriving on scene much more quickly. So that's
okay. But also the other part was, that's interesting.
Crime's been going down.
Crime has been going down. I mean, there's a lot of theories about it. I happen to think it's a function of lead, to be honest with you.
I agree. Lead and gasoline.
Lead and gasoline and lead regulation. It's another example of strong government regulation bringing about benefits that we couldn't even imagine.
I agree. What do you think? I don't understand the mechanism by which lead made crime happen. I saw the reports, though.
Because it rots your brain.
Lead is a neurotoxin.
Yeah.
And if you have brain damage, you're more likely to be maybe violent or antisocial.
That's crazy. Like in the 70s when we had leaded gasoline and it's just pumping out of all these cars, people are effectively having some kind of effect on their brain.
It aggregates. And so if you are living in areas that
maybe that's why antique car guys seem to be so aggressive.
Had a lot of lead paint, hadn't been remediated. And on top of that, you're getting gasoline that's in the air, or I should say lead that is, in the air because of gas that accumulates in your brain. And it creates neurotoxin. That's why we have that problem in Flint, Michigan, with the lead poisoning. We have a lot of children, who have special needs, and there is data. I mean, this is, it's very difficult to assess this stuff, but there's data that shows that about 20 years after lead gasoline is outlawed, or lead in gasoline is outlawed, you see a precipitous drop in crime that's happened both internationally and in this country.
What do you think about phthalates? Are you familiar?
No.
So plastic chemicals leaching into our food.
Oh, yeah.
Even these cans. So I'm going to give a shout out to Liquid Death. Look at mad at me, I guess. So Liquid Death is water in cans, and it says death to plastic. But every single aluminum can is lined with plastic. So it's all leaching into our, even these midriffs. They say they're endocrine disruptors. So they're affecting people's hormone regulation, hormone balance. This could lead to, depending on the study, hormone imbalance could lead to emotional disturbances or dissociative or identity issues.
This is one of the reasons why, since we are a couple of days away from an election, why I think it's so important to make sure that Donald Trump is not in a position to appoint any more Supreme Court justices. And
also to deregulate more. Like the fact that this guy went out there and he was just like, we're going to make your food safe again. It's like, dude, you're the one who made it unsafe.
I mean, the damage has been done, but it could be rectified, because one of the things that the Supreme Court has done in its assault on what is known as the Chevron doctrine and deference.
This is the reason that Biden hasn't been able to do anything about it, because I keep getting that argument from people where they're like, well, if this was Trump's problem, how come Biden hasn't done anything about it? This is why.
It will, over time, inhibit the ability of something like the EPA or the
FDA,
USDA or the FDA from assessing in real time that there is a problem with certain products that is poisoning our environment or poison.
This is why it took so long for the Boar's Head one to hit our radar. This is the reason that the McDonald's one took so long to hit our radar. This is why.
Our people.
And honestly, it's because they started putting more regulatory, they started hiring more people in these regulatory industries after Biden was elected. And this is why we even have them finding this stuff now.
People, and it will inhibit their ability to address it because.
But this is also why it was so prevalent. At the Boar's Head plant, it's because they didn't have enough regulators to go and actually conduct their searches.
We don't know in the future, and certainly if what chemicals, we discovered this over time.
Which I don't care. I'm sorry. I don't care what your position is on regulations. If you're for deregulations in food quality, just get the hell out of here.
Right? We didn't know this when plastics are fantastic. And then we start to realize there's these PFAS, there's these things that you mentioned. Maybe in the context of fracking, there are certain things leaching into water. But you probably know that you can't just there's no, I test water and then all the bad stuff comes back on the test sheet. You must look for specific things. Well, what the Supreme Court has done is inhibited, and this actually is even a problem for investors like the SEC and other agencies. They have inhibited the ability of these agencies to do their work as scientists, as financial regulators, find problems that exist that were not contemplated by Congress and act upon them. Because Congress doesn't have the ability, to act on every single or anticipate every single substance that may be a problem for people or
high fructose corn syrup.
I mean, that's also a problem. That was under the Nixon administration. They decided they wanted to increase the amount of money that expendable money that people had. So they decided to subsidize corn and make all the food cheaper. But
isn't it weird how the high fructose corn syrup thing happens? They subsidize corn. So then these researchers are like, corn's so cheap now because it's being paid for by by taxpayers that we can produce. It's actually difficult to make high fructose corn syrup. It's more expensive than sugar, but the government subsidy has resulted in.
I just noticed something. His magic cards, his skateboard deck, and then the guitar. It's like, oh shit, got a lot in common with you.
100%. That's also the filler in all our foods.
Yeah. I was reading something recently that said that the high colon cancer rate among young people is due to emulsifiers. They're using like Gillen gum and guar gum and these things in dairy products. So, or not even just dairy products, but like to make it seem like it's fatty. And so you're actually just eating this like gum stuff that gunks up your insides.
Funny enough, that's why the higher fat foods are actually better for you. That's why having like margarine, like if you have margarine in your diet, he's not wrong about this.
I don't know how you appropriately regulate or deal with things like that, because it's like you're saying, we don't know what it's going to do until we have all this data and research for a long period of time.
I mean, we could regulate against it. Like, I wasn't quite a fan of Michael Bloomberg, but one of the things he did was, I think it was during the Bloomberg administration, there were like polysaturated fats, I think it was, that were outlawed in New York City. I think that's become the norm around the country. Even you couldn't buy a 40-ounce soda.
That was kind of weird.
Not really, because it's the same principle, right? I mean, the fact is that like...
Yeah, I like how he can just teeter right to the edge and then just be like, oh.
And the pushback from conservatives in this was so ridiculous because, like, look, I can't go buy a pony version of like a beer. Like, I don't want a 12-ounce beer.
It's not illegal.
I want to... But I can't, it's not available to me. I mean, the size distribution, what difference does it make? Like at the end of the day.
Right, well, that's true because people just bought 2 sodas.
It is, yeah. I mean, if you buy 2 sodas, at least you're trying to basically, you're not outlawing sodas or whatnot, but you're trying to encourage less cost essentially for society, right? Because more people get diabetes, that ends up costing society more.
Yeah, which honestly, it also it ends up giving more money to society.
I mean, so there's
the higher taxes on the sodas.
A lot of value to regulation. Look, we saw this in the context of light bulbs. The light technology we have in here, right? All these LEDs, it's a lot cooler in here than it would be if we had the old-timey lights.
Oh, they burn out too.
The LEDs don't. They're cheaper. It took a couple of years before you got the technology was better. But maybe you remember this, but the outrage by conservatives over the light bulbs.
I remember that.
And we hear Trump talk about this too with the toilets and whatnot. Incidentally, I'm very sorry. You have a very fancy toilet. And you have a very fancy toilet.
You apologized.
It wouldn't flush.
You got to, because it's a fancy toilet. It's trying to save water. We try, man. So
no, I appreciate that.
You end up having to press it several times, and then
it didn't work for me.
Should we just get the regular one? The regular?
I don't know what you should do, but maybe I'll call the authorities because.
Well, I mean, but that's kind of an issue, right? We have this like high-end eco toilet.
It will. I think we just had confirmation. Sam totally dropped a deuce at Tim's.
It's a bidet, and it's fantastic. I really enjoyed that part of it. It's just,
but it won't flush.
It didn't flush.
Yeah, people keep asking, like, I don't understand. I'm like, you got to press like 3 times.
I'm sorry.
Because it is like a sensor.
I pressed it like 5.
So I mean, this kind of feels like an example. So we agree. We
I was not expecting that to be part of the conversation. That was hilarious.
Reduce excess waste. We want to reduce overuse.
Sam's admitting that Trump is right. I was right. You gotta flush multiple times. It's absolutely ridiculous.
We want to not waste things like fresh water, but now we have a toilet that requires 5 flushes because we tried doing the right thing.
Well, I mean, look, you just bought the wrong toilet. I mean,
One downstairs and
I have low flow. You can find low flow, manual toilets. I mean, that's a high end toilet. Somebody screwed up. But I mean, the bottom line is all of these
Must be a Kohler.
There are definitely regulations. Nobody's forcing you to buy that toilet, but there are definitely regulations that we find over time are not as effective as we thought. But the bottom line is all of this deregulation that we're seeing is a function of largely certainly of conservatives, but largely a function of the Republican Party. And now we see, for me, Kamala Harris would not be the first person that I would vote for, but in terms of the Supreme Court, that alone is enough for me.
How do we balance?
And federal courts, I would say too, broadly. I mean,
how do we balance this? Right. So there's a push and pull between private and public. There are, I've never been a laissez-faire libertarian guy. I've never heard a good argument from a libertarian about how you protect water. I've often brought up the Clean Water Restoration Act. Are you familiar?
A little bit.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just I think it was the 70s. I'm not sure if it was the Cuyahoga River.
It was the Cuyahoga River in Ohio that was on fire, and that's where we got the EPA from.
Right. And people were like, why is this? And what ends up happening is all of these corporations say,
I mean, he knows all about industrially ravaged Iguanas Canal. Wow, you know what? I can't say
don't look at me. I only did a little bit. And it's like, well, yeah, but literally everybody doing a little bit is an avalanche.
Yes, of course.
And I've never heard a good answer for how you deal with something like that. Just claiming someone owns the river changes nothing.
No, of course it doesn't. I mean, I've had many debates. People can look on my channel for my debates with libertarians, and at one point it all just turns into ridiculous mush with libertarians. And look, there's a...
This goes back to Ayn Rand.
The idea that you are either pro-regulation or anti-regulation, to be anti-regulation is, in my estimation...
This is why I did the middle part, by the way.
Absurd. But that doesn't mean that you don't look at each regulation and make an assessment as to whether it's functioning or not. There's a lot of local regulations that I think are unhelpful at times. I'm sure on a federal level there are some regulations that are unhelpful. But the bottom line is, fundamentally, do you allow the government to have this ability to regulate? The idea that we have that it inhibits the free market in some way, I think the idea of a free market is absurd, doesn't exist. But beyond that, we're always regulating the market. It's just a question for whose benefit are we regulating it? That's the bottom line.
I think free markets can only exist temporarily until someone amasses power and then displaces the market and becomes the power structure.
Yeah, Elon Musk is trying to do that right now.
There is no, what is a free market?
It would be like 10 people who live 10 miles from each other, they trade periodically. But once you get to a point where anyone controls one resource, you start to get power displacement, and then you'll end up with power centralizing.
Yes, well, the first thing that you're talking about, hasn't existed in
forever.
Yeah, forever. I mean, really.
But it's like I talk about this with left libertarianism because a lot of people on the right say it doesn't exist, and I'm like, it absolutely does. It's hippies living on a farm. You know what I mean? That's left libertarianism.
I've met a few.
They're just hippies on a farm. There's no need for great power structures or police because 10 people living on a farm get along just fine.
No, that's part of the problem with communes. God, that HBO documentary. I can't wait for the second part to come out, but they're about to run into that.
But and maybe they're completely self-sufficient, but they got there in some fashion, and it wasn't they drove on roads that were built by a society. So.
It is funny because I always hear libertarians say,
they ate out dumpsters,
It's a meme, who's going to build the roads? And I never actually get a response.
Well,
like private companies,
you can find private companies that are going to build roads, but they're
they do.
Yes, but they're not going to build it to everywhere. Like out here,
we had to build this road.
Well, you built the road, not the paved one.
The the one that goes onto the property we had to build.
Well, yes, of course, but the paved one gives you the opportunity to, that's the way you get to the airport.
Yeah. So I guess the point about regulation is. I certainly agree. It's like Republicans across the board are almost always talking about deregulation. But
it's absurd.
But I don't see Democrats talking about cleaning regulation either. Right? There's a give and take. But let me give you a better example.
What is cleaning regulation?
Getting rid of the bad ones.
Oh, my God. I mean, I would say so to an excessive standpoint. I mean, this is, and I'm not speaking positively this, but, the guy Cass Sunstein under the Obama administration was absurd. The idea, look, I don't think you ever have to worry about the Democrats putting too much regulation on things because to a certain extent, there's still elements within that party, and hopefully it's getting drummed out.
Well, guns is a good issue on
neoliberalism. Guns are
overregulated in ways that don't quite make sense, right? So that's an example of, for instance, semantic definitions of high capacity and standard capacity, what those even mean. But more importantly, the specific example would be in Maryland, they've banned the M1A, but the SCAR 20S is legal, despite the fact, and there's no
Yeah, we have some problems like that in Illinois. I'll admit that.
legal, like there's no reason for it other than Democrats just decided we will start regulating these things because it sounds good on paper.
Well, I think that probably the reason is that we have a court that decided in 2008, after almost 200 years in this country of not perceiving an individual right to carry a gun, but only in the context of being a well-regulated militia, that because the court has lurched so far to the right over the past 2 decades, particularly most recently, that I think the idea is that you chip away at this from a legal perspective to try and build a legal precedent by doing, whatever. I mean, I'm not familiar with that specific regulation, but I would imagine that's the idea. We're going to get as much regulation as we can in this. I don't know, like, what's the damage done by that? Maybe from the perspective.
Made people felons who have like an archaic, it's unfair to call it archaic, I guess, but like the M1 Garand is like a Vietnam weapon. And the M1A is a more modern version, but it's like a wood stock, and it's got like it's a 308. The SCAR 20S is a modern AR-15 style variant, which is substantially more efficient.
Well, I am definitely in favor of outlawing,
Yeah, assault, like the assault weapons ban that went up in 2004. That there is actual data that you can see that like the following year school shootings went up like 100%. So that's when we started just seeing like the degradation of our country, and I hate to say like mass murders on the scale that we have.
All of them.
I mean, I can remember a time where was it oh my God, what's the term I'm looking for?
If that makes it easier.
Every single one.
Well, I listen. I think that people. I have no problem with people using weapons that are specifically for hunting.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of my point, but also get back to this.
That's I'm okay with that. But
see how I segued into guns now?
well, I'm happy to. I mean, it's absurd. I think.
But
the Supreme Court has lurched to the right, and we
Completely
have
agree.
2 Supreme Court justices on the right who I think want to retire in Alito and in Clarence Thomas. And I would love Donald Trump not to have the opportunity to appoint their successors.
I don't want to go too. I want to stay on the guns for a bit, but the sign's pointing to a Trump victory. It doesn't mean he's going to win. I don't know if he's going to win.
Didn't you tell me we were driving up and somebody asked me if I'd been on your show before, and I said, yeah, I don't know what show it was because you got so many, but
It was actually this channel.
okay.
That was like 7 years ago.
And nobody can find that interview, but I'm quite convinced that you also predicted a Trump victory then, and that must have been like it was pre-COVID.
Dude, he said that there was going to be a sweep.
Well, this was like 2017, 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe not, but I'm pretty sure it was.
I mean, I'm unclear as to who's going to win this election.
nobody knows.
I see positive signs for Harris, but I can't tell if that's me being aspirational or not. So
Well, I would certainly say I learned my lesson with 2020, right? So I'm looking at, for instance, Moody's Analytics, and they always release this economic report where they're like, here's our projections, and they tout how it's historically accurate. And then what I think I saw was there was an increase in support for Trump. And what I thought I was calling out accurately was an increase in opposition to Trump, but the opposition certainly was greater. But I think the biggest function of 2020 was Republicans just don't know how to win elections. That's why I think the last Republican to win a popular vote was it Reagan, I think?
well, Bush in his second
Bush.
election did, but he did that by basically coming out and bashing gay people and driving out
war.
no.
Yeah, it was kind of the war machine.
Well, I think that was actually, despite the fact, I mean, in the wake of 9/11, there was a lot of intimidation by the Republicans, and they attacked a lot of Democrats for being, Max Cleland, who lost both his arms and his legs or an arm and 2 of his legs, I think it was. He was running for re-election in Georgia, and they called him Osama bin Laden.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, who knows? Hillary Clinton had a 95% chance of winning, and the 5% came in. So I don't. But let's go back to. I'm going to ask you about the Supreme Court, because it sounds like you have a problem with how their right would shift. Is that right?
The first challenge is like right and left mean different things in different areas of governance and culture and things like this. So it's when we talk about right.
Well, I'm talking about in terms of Supreme Court, in the context of what a Supreme Court does. I mean,
that
they don't
seems semantical.
dictate culture so much as they dictate law.
No, what I mean is, like you say, rightward shift, and defining what right and left are in different contexts, I think, matters, because if we say
in the context of the Supreme Court, rightward shift would be one which
traditionalist, I would say, versus progressive. That's what I'm trying to draw the distinction on, because like right economic is they're certainly not right economic to a certain degree.
The Supreme Court is not right wing in terms of
What?
economics.
So right economics to imply more like laissez-faire capitalism versus.
Sorry.
Oh my God, they're completely
I
attacking
actually had to pause
the
to,
government's
like,
ability to
process that.
regulate. They're completely attacking the government and disempowering the government is basically saying, like, I mean, government is always
That's not laissez-faire, right?
it is almost definitionally laissez-faire. Yeah.
Well, no, like allowing large corporations to have revolving door policies and protections for large corporations is not
revolving door policies. What is that? What do you
like when like the CEO of Halliburton gets a job in government or something like this, right?
Well,
when there's an exchange between the government.
Laissez-faire is where you basically is. I mean,
Yeah, buyer
I think it's a
beware, right?
smokes. No, that's caveat emptor.
I know. That's why I'm insulting it.
Laissez-faire is where essentially, and I think it's a little bit of a smokescreen, but laissez-faire specifically means the government completely backs off and does not intervene in
Right.
what's going
And what
on.
I'm saying is I think many of these powerful elites that we would describe as right are in favor of protections for their buddies and their billionaires.
Well, the
Tax break.
Yeah, I have to agree with them on that.
reality of neoliberalism as it coming out of Mont Pelerin and the society it was ultimately about a protection racket for a specific industry or specific players within an industry.
But fair point. More right word than like relative to where we are. Yes, completely agree.
No, it's just it's almost definitionally right.
Right word shift. Yeah, I
Why
think
does he
I'm
do
pulling hairs,
this? Like, why does he does he just not want to say, Sam, I think you're right? Like he's taking the long way of going around in circles and then agreeing with Sam.
Well,
so.
but anyway, so I agree to a certain
It's
extent.
weird.
I'm fairly modern on a lot of issues. I think there's got to be some push and pull. I think I'd like to see a Democratic Party that provides sound regulation in key areas that matter, like we're talking about lead and water and things like this. And then I'd like to see actually any party, I don't care who does it, like it's a sound reason to be like, hey, don't dump lead and garbage in our water. But at the same time, it's also to say, hey, we should reassess what we blocked and why we blocked it, and maybe there's some regulation.
What specifically?
He's going on about California. It's that whole right wing talking point about the California regulations that are wrecking certain industries.
Talking about
Like certain things to be deregulated?
like what?
So the M1A, for instance, right? So I brought it to guns. My point is just in general.
What's the
New.
what-
It's a specific example of where Democrats have regulated firearms in a way that makes literally no sense.
okay, it makes no
Doesn't do
sense.
anything.
What's the downside here?
Making people felons for owning something while
How many
allowing
of those people have been made felons by owning a
10,000? I don't know more.
10,000 felons? There are 10,000 felons in when was this in Maryland?
You mean convicted?
No, you said felon. I'm just asking.
Right. So I'll give you an example. The pistol brace ruling, right? So when the courts ruled that pistol braces made a pistol a short-barreled rifle, I actually had to dismantle a bunch of my weapons and separate. And there was no law passed. There was no act of Congress. This was ATF making an arbitrary decision that I was now committing felonies for simply having owned a legal product that I bought that was legal at the time. And Congress never passed this law. So now I risk prison over a nonsensical
Wait a second.
regulation.
You were talking about Democrats and
Overregulating things.
overregulating, but you just said that this was not a law that was passed. It was an assessment made by the courts.
The ATF.
No, it wasn't by the courts. It was the ATF, arbitrarily.
And have
This is the Chevron
The
rule,
ATF
that
answers to the
agencies
courts,
have a right
dude.
to self-regulate and make their determinations.
Sorry.
So the ATF, this
Does he not know how government agencies work?
partly why people on the right were celebrating this.
Wait,
'Cause the
wait,
ATF
wait,
was
wait,
arbitrarily
wait.
deciding that it was now a crime without any act of Congress. So we had to actually, I had to
Okay,
go
so aside from these instances with you don't like some of these gun regulations, what other regulations do you have a problem with?
I don't know. I mean, there are certain things that I want to be regulated more than I think about in terms of
what?
deregulation.
So you're stepping on your own point, dude. What are you talking about?
The lead in the water pipes is the easiest example.
Yeah, it's the
Lead
easiest.
is actually
And why isn't it being enforced is the question, I suppose. But
well,
also,
it is being enforced. I mean, the
there-
problem at what
How about
happened
uranium too?
what happened in Michigan was that you had a Republican governor who wanted to basically disempower a city that was, frankly, largely African American city, and
Yeah, it was making him look bad. Let's be honest.
I think gambling should be regulated. I am no fan of the deregulation.
Yeah.
I think what we
Yeah, I thought that was ridiculous, too.
Specifically, I get that you have some issue with some like very marginal
Alex
gun
should be
stuff.
regulated.
But what should not be regulated? Like you said, that you have a problem with what Democrats are doing in terms of regulation. I'm curious as to. What
I
those
think
are.
that's an overestimation. I think that I would like to see regulations reassessed and then either.
But which ones? What are you talking about?
I'm saying we should have a review of regulation in general.
So you think
What
we
do
should
you-
review
what do you-
every
what do you-
single regulation?
So simultaneously, he wants more regulations on water pipes and things like clean air, but then he wants to get rid of regulations on things like food. Or what is he talking about? Because like he keeps saying the gun thing, but does he not see how that's the slippery slope? Like,
regulation that exists.
I think they should have sunset clauses.
What?
Well,
Why?
because
No.
nothing's infinite, nothing's absolute.
Again, food regulations should be absolute. Those should be codified into law for forever.
No, we might say, for instance, okay, I'll give you an example of regulation.
But lead's always going to be bad for people.
Yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So
Yes,
that one we
asbestos
wouldn't
too,
sunset, right?
and they were trying to bring that back.
Yeah. We're talking about if we apply a regulation to a specific body or something, a body of water, perhaps the body of water may change. So, I'll give you an example. Like we have
toxins in the water are always going to be toxic.
which is why, like I said, I'm in favor of more regulation, and that the deregulation thing is just a safeguard on we shouldn't be making sure that we're reassessing periodically.
Why would you sunset like those like regulations on what is poisonous in water, for instance?
I wouldn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you just said that.
That's why I said I think it's an overestimation of. I think you may overestimate what I'm trying to say.
Oh.
Is that
Oh.
typically I think like phthalates, for instance, should be regulated. I don't believe there's a quote unquote free market solution to keeping endocrine disruptors in our food. That makes no sense.
No, I agree with that. I don't think that's controversial. But what,
There are regulations on things like your vehicles, your engine standards, guns, for instance.
Yeah, that's part of the clean air standard, and the gun standard is I guess it's like the semblance of trying to say, we need to have some regulations on this.
And I'm not
but-
saying I know specifically each and every regulation that should be deregulated. I think it is prudent for a society to say, hey, there's no market solution to stop people putting poison in our food. Our food has become just trash. But there is still a circumstance where we do understand that not every government application is going to be permanent or will work permanently. And I can put it a different way. There may come a point where the regulation isn't strong enough. And if we don't reassess what the law is.
I have no problem with strengthening regulations. I just, when you say deregulate.
Yeah, but the thing is, this flies in the face of actual like funding. So think about this, like the way that he wants to deregulate certain industries, that's not going to work when you need to fund like the EPA and like this makes very little sense on
Or we
Tim's
should
part.
have the regulations sunset or anything like that. I mean,
It just depends on what
you understand that like what we're talking about here is there is a battle between people who would profit privately and socialize the costs. In other words, put it on all of us. So you want to sell, well, let's just go back to Flint.
Yeah.
You want to sell the, you want privatize this water supply. You want to give contracts to, because this is what the Republican governor there wanted to do. And the costs associated in this instance, like they wanted to save money by not necessarily treating the water or, by, delivering it in a way that will save them money. But the costs are socialized insofar as you've poisoned thousands of these children.
I went to Flint and I actually ran tests on the water, and it's crazy the macroeconomic issues at hand in Michigan, and what ends up with like a Republican politician is that.
How can he do all that and still hold water for Republicans the way that he has for the past 4 years, 5 years?
For a lot of the people that live in the area, they're not directly impacted by what's happening to these kids, right? For people who live outside the area, they're going to see the news and they're going to say, like, how could this be possible? And so what ends up happening is actually it was a dude from Occupy who was working up in Detroit who was talking about the water crisis. And the problem started with population collapse. When, so he explained to me like this: you have a fixed water system in the Detroit and the surrounding cities. Let's say, hypothetical numbers, 100 people live in an area. It's $10 per person per month to run that fixed water system. So let's say 10 people, and it's $100 a month. Let's make it simple. If 5 of those people leave, the fixed water costs remain the same, and now it's $20 per person.
Oh yeah, no, I get that.
So what ended up happening?
Who's paying for that?
The city, the people who live there are paying the taxes to maintain it. They're paying their water bills.
That's how it works already.
But
what ends up
because
happening
we have a private enterprise that is getting in between the deliverance of that water and the people, that their profit margins go down. I mean, if you go and you look at like activists there will also tell you this was like a big privatization.
Oh, he was talking about a privatized corporation stepping in and doing. Okay.
I mean, this is the biggest problem that we're dealing
thought he
with
was talking
in my
about the
estimation
city
around this country is the movements to privatize, the idea that corporations can do something better than the government. Look, all major enterprises have waste. All major enterprises are in some fashion are going to be subjected to abuse and fraud, whether it's a private corporation or a government entity.
Yeah, but you could so to Tim's point, you could actually go to the train deregulations. And this is part of the problem. But you could also say that he's technically arguing in favor of making sure that there are more train cars and that you have less regulation on those, even though there's chemicals in there. Like, actually, that'd be a good one to ask him is like, how do you feel about, loading train cars with a bunch of like dangerous chemicals, but also, regulating them.
But why do we have, for instance, why do we have health insurance companies? We don't need them. We don't need them. We know we have already run a massive experiment for now 60 years on a single payer health insurance program, and it's called Medicare. And it's wildly successful. To the extent that it's not, it's only because people have been trying to chip away and privatize different parts of it.
Yeah, the only reason that it's not fully funded is because we have our privatized healthcare system.
Well, we're doing that already with a quarter of
I
our
know,
country.
hot take.
There's no reason why we shouldn't have single-payer health insurance for everybody. We don't need insurance companies. People talk about bureaucrats getting in between your doctor and your health. Anybody out there who has dealt with it, and I'm old, I'm much older than you are, and everybody here, the dealing with your health insurance. When you're younger, you don't use it as much.
Right.
Dealing with your health insurance, talk about bureaucrats getting involved in this.
Yeah, I'm 37. I just started using my health insurance about 2-3 years ago, like seriously, outside of like hockey injury or whatever. And it's insane because even the cost of an x-ray coming back where you have full coverage, it could totally bankrupt you.
It's a huge pain in the ass. And Medicare is a much easier program.
You know what's really crazy is when I left Vice and I went to join Fusion, there was a week period where I was not employed and I got a kidney stone. And holy crap, I had to go to the hospital. And thankfully, never had one since. They tried charging me, I think, what was it? It was like, I think it was like, $16,000 to $18,000 for a 3-day stay.
Yep.
And I was just like, what?
Yep.
I laid in a bed, dude. But here's the best part. I said, hey, I just switched employment, so I don't have insurance. And they went, oh, no worries. And then they sent me a bill for like $39.
Yeah, no, and that I actually, even with insurance, I did the same thing. You just challenge the bill and automatically they're just like, oh, okay, 13,000. Can you do 300? It's like, yeah, that's much better.
Yeah. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Where did that money go?
Yeah.
Why were you trying to charge me that money? How does that make sense at all?
I'm 100% in agreement with him.
The problem is that health insurance, there is no incentive for insurance companies to keep costs low because they basically get a percentage of what the expenses are.
Yes.
The way that you contain costs is by having a single payer that can look at the data across the country.
Cheers to this.
And assess, is this a valid treatment or is that a valid treatment? There's been, all sorts of studies on this. And we could save this country a tremendous amount of money long term, but not just the country. I'm saying as individuals, plus on top of which all the pain in the ass that's associated with your health insurance. And this is one of the things. This brings up again, we have an election in 3 days. I think Donald Trump is garbage, frankly. But the real concern I have about Donald Trump becoming president is that it's going to empower the Republican Party. Mike Johnson the other day said he's going to cut the ACA. And now, aside from the fact that the Republicans tried to repeal the ACA like 50 times or whatever, I don't care about that.
They're lying, by the way.
Well,
it's so convenient for you to just be like, they're lying. So don't you can still support them just because they're lying. And then it's like, no, they have a track record of trying to repeal the ACA, dude.
They're lying because they have no ideas about this. And to the extent that they're going to change anything, I mean, Trump did, attempt to do on the margins to disable the ACA. There are 3 aspects of the ACA. And it was originally called the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act.
This reminds me of the scene from Inglourious Bastards.
PPACA.
He wants to make sure there's a German spy. I would like 3.
They dropped the PP thing, which I think was a real problem because that's actually what this law did better than anything else. It expanded Medicaid. So you had millions of people, low-income people, who had the ability. Not every doctor takes Medicaid, but to the extent that they could get a provider, millions of people who had health insurance for the first time. The other thing it did is it created these marketplaces. This was sort of a right-wing subsidized industry deal. I think it's a useless, it didn't lower the cost. It bent the cost curve, but it basically just slowed the rate of increase on insurance. I think we can do a lot better with a single payer thing. But the third thing it did, which is also the most important for us right here in this room, is the patient protection part. Prior to this, you could be denied care because you had some type of pre-existing condition, pregnancy,
diabetes.
Diabetes. Yeah. I mean, really, just a list of things. You could be denied care, or you could be charged an exorbitant amount.
Like my mom. My mom was denied basically because she has a mental disorder where, they constantly would just be like, no, you can't. Then the second the ACA went through, she was approved. She has great coverage. Her quality of life has improved insanely. So it's, yeah.
The other thing that could happen is that, like you say,
I'm a little personally involved in this one. So anytime they talk about repealing the ACA, I'm just like, enough of you guys. I guess repeal and replace. Like, notice how they're not even trying to replace this time.
all of a sudden you have kidney stones. 80% of the cost of health insurance in this country is borne by 20% of the people. And you don't know if you're going to be 1 out of 5. But if you are, it's going to end up costing you $18,000 or you're hit by a bus. The insurance companies used to say, you have an annual limit. So, you got hit by a bus, you're in the hospital for 2 or 3 months. I'm sorry, buddy, but you just ran out of your health insurance. Or annually, lifetime. So you get cancer, your treatment costs this amount. Not only have you exhausted it for the year, you've done it, but...
Yeah, it's also, even if you had private insurance, then say that you were to get cancer, they could kick you off your plan.
When Mike Johnson says he's going to cut the ACA, what they're talking about, and when he said we're going to, not everybody needs this insurance. Young people maybe feel like they don't need this health insurance. When they do that, the only way for them to do that is to raise prices on everybody else. And so the whole point of insurance is that I may not need it in my 20s in the way that I would need it in my 50s. But I'm going to be 50. And so it smooths it out.
I think...
And that's the whole point. And that's why I really am, again, with my hesitation about Harris, because of, particularly in terms of Gaza, which we can talk about in a moment if you want. But
there's
putting the Republicans in power, they have gotten progressively worse on all of these issues over the past 20 years.
There are two things I think that play a role with the ACA especially. We had a Republican on IRL, and he just said, they came to me and told me not to vote in favor of it. They said specifically it's a wedge issue we want to campaign on, so let's keep it around. This is what I see with the bulk of politicians. They're just pretending to support things, and then they dangle. I mean, they said Obama said he wanted to codify Roe, and then he didn't, and it's been a talking point for a long time.
I mean,
he didn't think he needed to.
The thing that Obama expended all of his political capital on was the ACA, and I think they did want to codify Roe, but I don't think, frankly, I can tell you that in talking to people in that world, they never thought the Supreme Court would overturn it.
I definitely want to get into that, but I want to add one more thing too, is what the Republicans and Democrats have both privately been saying is, and this is funny because I think one of the arguments against these major healthcare, I shouldn't say healthcare, but like insurance companies is the bloat and bureaucracy that is created in this system, which seems to solve nothing, but actually cost us money. And then you hear these politicians have actually said, a large portion of our economy is these health insurance systems. And so if we were to do away with it, you're going to lose all of these bureaucratic middle managers. And I'm like, they're concerned about getting reelected if there is a perceived economic downturn from loss of jobs.
No, I mean,
none of that is an argument for or against healthcare.
No, I don't think that's the case because look, you're going to need people to administer this stuff. A lot of people in the healthcare industry would still have jobs. It's just that they would be either the government would contract to them, as it's done, to a certain extent now, to do this work. It's just that we would not have shareholders where 10% of what's going on or 20% of what's going on is a function of shareholders.
Right. And you could also argue that, like, the government contracts, like, this is why Halliburton was fighting so hard to go back to Iraq. Like, they wanted those government contracts. Like, a lot of people that work within, like, the private sector that get federal funds, they will always joke about how it's just like, we want those government jobs because we got to work half as hard.
Let me ask you a question, though. So there was a story, I think it was out of Georgia, where some young kid...
Anecdotal, of course.
...had a genetic disorder, and there was a treatment. But it's some kind of like rare genetic treatment that costs $1 million to produce. And the family had sued the state saying that the state should pay for this because it's part of a plan that they had with government benefits and something like that. And the state argued, we can't pay $1 million every time we have to do this treatment. And so the challenge then becomes treatments for diseases go so far as technology can allow.
He's kind of crapping on his last argument there. Just watch in real time how he figures this one out.
I'm sure there's grant programs and ways we can develop technology, but what do we do if we do, say, like single payer healthcare and there's 10 people who have a rare genetic disorder that's killing them, but one treatment available? How do we assess? Is it like a triage system? How do we distribute that?
Oh, how's it distributed now?
Rich people.
Well, okay. There's some. I'm not saying that sickness is going to go away with a single payer healthcare program, but the bottom line is that fundamentally more people will have better coverage and ultimately more money in their pockets, despite the fact that we'll have to tax more for it. But over the course of their lifetime, will have more money in their pockets and will not have the insecurity that comes with losing their job, wondering whether or not, like you say, in between jobs. They will not have the headaches of like, oh, my insurance company has dropped me this year, or I've got new programs, or I have new things. That's you will find after your kid is born that half of your time is spent on like all of this like bureaucracy in the private healthcare industry.
What if instead of taxing more, we just reallocated existing taxes? Theoretically, lowering it in some areas.
We what?
Reallocate existing taxes because people pay a lot already, right?
Do they though? I don't think so. I mean, if you look at taxation relative to like the 1950s, you know what the top marginal tax rate was?
98%.
In 1950.
All they did was pull loopholes and other BS to avoid.
No, actually, that's not true. No, it isn't. If you can actually, I can tell you right now.
Look, he sat there just, yes, it is. He's so confident.
Some of your libertarians.
Let me explain something real quick. If the government came and told me they're taxing me 100%, I wouldn't pay any of those taxes. It's never going to happen.
If the government is taxing you 100%, you will not work. You will not pay for those taxes, and you will not get it.
I will work. I will make money. And so the issue is
you will commit crime.
No. It's Donald Trump brought this up in 2016 when he was like, we utilize the system as it exists to avoid paying through the mechanisms. For example,
in the 1950s and 60s.
I get it. No. There's $1 million deduction for equipment, for instance. So value earned can be retained outside of the U.S. dollar without paying taxes on it.
Great.
This is what a lot of people do. So they can tax as high as they want, but wealthy people will always get around it, and poor people can't.
In the 50s and 60s, the highest marginal tax rate, over $470,000 if you earned, which would be equivalent to about $3 million a day. Every dollar over that was taxed at a 90% rate. We had the greatest economic expansion this country has seen during that time period. Now, part of it obviously has to do with post-war or World War II. There's a lot of factors, but the tax rate did not inhibit any of that growth. The effective tax rate.
No, I agree.
The effective tax rate. The effective.
Inflate's the wrong word.
The effective tax rate. It was 50%. So that includes all the deductions, all of the hijinks that's associated with that, the loopholes and whatnot. 50% for those high earning. So I don't need to raise taxes on people who are making.
We don't need to argue this because I don't think there's any point of contention. I'm saying that if you go to people and say we want to give you health care, but it's going to raise your taxes, they're going to recoil in horror. Whether it's good for them or bad for them.
I think Bernie Sanders was on the way of making that argument. But if you
no, it depends. It depends on how you also make that argument. If he was just saying about Bernie was really good at turning it and showing us, hey, you already pay this much. Like if you have a health issue, or if you even if you don't have a health issue, this is how much you're paying in taxes for this at this moment. So it was marginally a little bit more that we'd be paying privately as just a private citizen, but we would be getting a lot more from it because we wouldn't be paying so much in our own healthcare. I can tell you from my personal experience that I would definitely benefit from a single payer system. But
if you and I advocate for single payer healthcare, and we get other people to advocate for single payer healthcare, we can do this. Are we on board?
I
have your pledge right now to support a single payer healthcare system.
Depends on the structure of the single payer healthcare system. I'm for
in principle.
I would like to see a private option and a public option. I think it's fine if we have what I call universal basic healthcare.
That's kind of what the ACA was doing.
Where
I don't think you need to outlaw private healthcare, but would you agree that we need to make sure that if you're licensed to practice medicine is a function of having, let's say, 90% of your clients accept 90% of your payments from Medicare?
I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that question.
Then just trust me.
What I can say is...
that was actually one of the best answers Tim has ever given.
It makes no sense that a kid gets the flu and dies in this day and age. It makes no sense that a kid will break his leg and then the hospital says, sorry, you don't have the right coverage for this. These are basic things that, first-year medical students could help treat, and we have ample Tamiflu and things like this. So those stories piss me off, especially insulin, for instance. People who are diabetic, there was one story where a guy...
Well, you know who capped insulin, don't you?
It was the president, right? Yeah. There was a guy who had, I think he was diabetic, and he had to choose between rent or insulin.
Sure. Oh, I don't think it's just a guy.
Right, exactly.
There's a lot of people that...
To me, it's silly and makes no sense. But my point was simply... As a way to segue to American foreign policy and our gross spending on wars that don't provide for the American people, if we start by saying, hey, look, we don't need to raise your taxes. We just don't need to build as many tanks. Instead of building tanks, we're going to build, factories for insulin and hospitals and hire medical workers.
I don't believe, frankly, we don't need taxes to spend money. We have shown that. Okay.
We don't. It's right.
We don't.
Taxes are basically just.
We don't. We're a sovereign.
Controls.
This is somewhat unique to the United States because we have such control over our currency, and it is essentially the world's currency.
Not for long.
Well, people have been saying that for decades. We'll see about that. But
Saudis dropped the petrodollar.
I understand.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that the reason why we would have taxes
Yeah, but just because they did that, I think that was in retaliation to us becoming more of an energy producer than them.
in the way that I suggest is to essentially make it illegal to have this type of wealth disparity in our society. I'm okay with some wealth disparity. That's fine. But the bottom line is we have such enormous wealth disparity. The Fed came out with a report a couple of weeks ago. The reason why the economic numbers look so good, and they do, our economic numbers look good relative to the way that we have measured the economy over years. But the reason why they look so good is because of the tremendous wealth disparity we have in this country, where very rich people are driving consumer spending. And so taxation for me is a mechanism in which to inhibit wealth disparity.
So there, 50-50, yes, I agree. And then there's other contextual components to it. When the tax rate goes up, for instance, like I mentioned, there's $1 million per year tax deduction for equipment for a company. Well, all that means is if there's a guy who runs a business and he makes $1 million profit, and you're telling him once the year rolls over, he's got to give 40% or whatever that number is to the government, he's going to go buy $1 million worth of motorcycles for the business. And then that, there's depreciation, but then he just says, if it applies to the business. Now, what that does do is
if
people who make the motorcycles are getting jobs.
Yeah, exactly. I have no problem with taxation also causing wealthy people to stop hoarding money. They're hoarding
that's
money.
My point. It caused a lot of people think like, oh, if you tax these businesses, they're not going to hire them. Like, no, it's the other way around. If you tell a company that they're going to lose $1 million at the end of the year, they're going to spend it on something to retain the value of the money they earned. So rich people end up
they're going to reinvest it in their business.
Or create new businesses.
Unfortunately, the stock market has kind of proven you wrong on this one. Stock buybacks that's not like if you say that's investing in the company, but I think that he's kind of going along the lines of like, yeah, they'll start paying employees more.
Do not see a reality where that makes sense, where someone's like,
You don't think it makes sense to create new businesses?
No, I'm saying there's no reality where a rich person says, I'm going to keep $1 million in the bank and then give half to the government. They're going to say, I'm going to buy $1 million worth of stuff so I can retain the value that I've earned. The tax doesn't matter. He's going to reinvest it in some way that allows him to retain the value without giving it to the government, which is what
I don't mind taxation that gets rich people to reinvest in capital expenditures. But we have millionaires and billionaires who are sitting on money and just dumping it into the stock market. So if you're suggesting to me that capital gains tax should be raised to where it is with wages, we are in agreement.
The challenge with the stock market is 401ks. It's all bundled together. So you've got wealthy investors who are just creating these massive portfolios where they're extracting value from systems that provide nothing.
Yeah, and putting our 401ks on the line. I always disagreed with this.
And then you have retarees. So this is where it's coupled, I guess. That's a challenge. And
there's been an attempt by Wall Street to get more people in that boat, but we still have like 80% of the stocks are owned by 10, 20% of the people. It's completely unbalanced. Yeah, I agree with that.
People who
join me in calling for a much higher market.
All right, I'm gonna just say this though. Like, it's so weird to hear Tim pontificate on these things, but then still blanket support Trump, support the Republicans, constantly denigrate the left. Like, does he not understand? Like, I think this is where he was going, where he's like, yeah, technically I'm a centrist, I'm center left, and I want to listen to the Republican side. It's
marginal tax rate at the high end and capital gains and wage taxes being the same. And we could talk about Social Security and I know you want to get to foreign policy.
So I've been a fan of, so I think one of the challenges, what's the top tax rates? 250 above, $250,000 and more. I think they changed it a couple years ago or something. They might have increased it. But you had a long time ago, $250,000 is a lot of money, if we go back 50 or whatever years. And they're like, okay, so after 250 year tax.
Yeah, somebody who makes less than that, it's still a lot of money, man.
At a higher rate. I've been for a long time in favor of, we've got to create more scales in the progressive tax rate.
Like, like I said, in 1950s and 60s, $470,000, 90% tax rate for every dollar made over that. That's the way that marginal taxes work. But that number would be $3 million today. So I would be okay with doing $3 million.
So on paper, I say this, right? And then, of course, people are going to say, oh, why is Tim now saying we should have a higher? The problem then is when you run to the other wall of foreign policy. What is the utilization of taxes for? The first thing you got to understand is the way the U.S. government uses money. People think that you get taxed and the government spends the money. It's not how it works. The government will issue debts or whatever, or agree to make payments, tax you, and then later cover those. Or there's fractional reserve monetary creation, where they literally just create the debt upon the money upon the issuance of debt. So taxation does correlate directly with government spending, but it's not one-to-one. The issue I take is, all of the money we're spending on foreign policy for the purpose of propping up the petrodollar. And I understand the arguments.
So you're talking about the $260 billion we've given Israel over 30 years?
Absolutely. And Ukraine over the past 2 years. For what, the argument, it's the neolib, neocon, or whatever you want to call it.
And here we get into the crux of why the Russians were just like, oh, he is very useful, idiot. We give him the rubles.
Of maintaining support for the petrodollar, which allows us, like you were mentioning, with control of this currency, we can spend in ways other countries can't. As long as we maintain the petrodollar, we do not need to maintain exports at the same rate of spending like other countries do, because world police, I guess. And so what ends up happening is with, for instance, what we're seeing with Ukraine is all correlating with the Qatar-Turkey pipeline trying to offset the Gazprom gas monopoly in Europe. Effectively, the simple answer is maintain petrodollar against adversaries of the petrodollar.
Do you think that, and I want to turn to your opinion on Israel, but do you think that the United States wanted Russia to invade Ukraine?
No, absolutely not. So you're familiar with the Qatar-Turkey pipeline?
Not particularly.
I harp on it quite a bit. It is it's a limited component of the ongoing conflict from the Middle East into Europe. But in 2009, I think it was, the United States was trying to build a pipeline from Qatar through Syria, Turkey into Europe, which would help offset the Gazprom gas monopoly. Gazprom controls about 20%. Syria said no. Syria said, quite literally, and this is a quote, or I'm paraphrasing their quote, our ally Russia would never allow us to allow this to go through our country. Lucky for the United States that a civil war just happened to occur, and Bashar al-Assad was the enemy of the United States, who was gassing his own people. And
were you in support of Obama not wanting to get involved in that?
I don't know enough specifically, but what I would say is we should not have been involved in Syria.
Correct.
The United States' interest is, for a lot of the spending we do, is to prop up the petrodollar, militaristically or otherwise. And we were trying to compete with Russia on natural gas. This is why we wanted a foothold in Ukraine. After the Qatar-Turkey pipeline fails, what ends up happening is Russia, Iran, and Turkey started cutting a deal with to run a pipeline from the same gas
what
field.
was also problematic about Trump getting out of the Iran nuke deal unilaterally in that respect, right? Because we have now pushed Iran further away into that sphere of influence.
As it pertains to the gas trade-offs and the conflicts in Europe, I don't know. I wouldn't know enough. I can say that even during Obama's Stuxnet was...
I run into that problem occasionally with this guy, where it's just like, doing something weird here.
Probably a really bad idea. You're familiar with Stuxnet?
Yeah, that was Israel.
Israel and the United States teamed up to create a virus that blew up centrifuges in Iran, which act of war much. I'm surprised it didn't escalate in a dangerous way.
I mean, but fortunately, one of the best things that Obama did was to make that nuke deal. Let me ask you this, since you bring up Russia.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that you have to put some type of disclaimer because of the whole tenant thing, or no?
No. I never received money from Russia. We never were given any money to create anything. Tenant Media and
it was all laundered through Tenant Media. I mean, obviously you didn't get you weren't getting paid in rubles.
So I can try. Right. I'll keep it real simple. You have sponsors on your show. Did you ever ask who their investors are? Did you?
The sponsors?
Yeah, like a company comes to you and says, "We want to, have you shout us out or something." Do you look into their financiers? Do you dig through their bank accounts?
I mean, we get it all from media brokers, but they weren't advertising on your show. They were they were paying you a license deal,
a license fee.
Yeah.
So I licensed to Nat Geo. I never asked them who their investors were.
Who? National Geographic?
Yeah. When I license through all these other big distributors, someone comes to me, they say, we want a license. It goes to our lawyer comes back, says, here's the agreed upon fee. I say, thank you and have a nice day. And then we move on.
So was it just Ruben who asked who Gerard Depardieu or whatever that guy's name was?
I don't know what Dave did or anybody else did.
Did you ask about who that guy was?
Absolutely. And you know what's crazy?
Well, wait a second. Why did you ask about who that guy was?
Wanted to know. Isn't that due diligence?
Yeah, but you just said you don't ask who the investors are.
No, I said, do you? Do you dig into all of these things?
I've never actually been approached with anything even remotely like that.
So when I got reached out to by Discovery and Nat Geo, I said, I'm familiar with what this is. It's
yeah, no. If I mean, I licensed my show to Peacock, and
right, you know what they are.
Well, yeah, I mean, National Geographic is a well-known thing. But if somebody comes in and says, we're going to give you that kind of money for your programming, I'd be like,
how much money do you make on Majority Report?
Fuck is that?
How much money do you make on Majority Report?
How much do I make from on our revenue from the whole show?
All of it, 100%.
I mean, it's six figures revenue, yeah,
per month,
yeah.
So why were you
figures? Yeah.
So you're over 100K per month on Majority Report.
I think. Well, I mean, on some months. I mean, certainly the past couple of months have been really good. Some months are a little bit less.
I think you do Majority. I don't know about your other channels, but you do about 20 million per month in views.
Other channels?
I don't know if you have other shows. I'm saying
no.
Majority Report does about 20 million.
That's it.
And with 20 million views per month, you do over six figures.
Wow.
We had 20 million views for 2 months this year.
If you do 20 million views per month, I think is your YouTube metric.
Well,
Give me some of that.
I mean, it's a little bit less now, but okay.
Oh yeah. If a company came to you and wanted to license the show, which would
I can tell you, Peacock licensed a Majority Report we were on Peacock for a year.
you want to say what they gave you?
I will tell you this, from what I read, you made more in a month than we made in a year.
Maybe that's just bad business on your part, I guess.
Maybe.
So,
or maybe it turns out that they were just a company who had metrics as opposed to like we're trying to get propaganda.
Yeah.
No, I think.
See, I have a feeling
I can tell you how
Yeah, hold on. Let Sam get this one out because I have a feeling that he's about to own you.
much money we make at this company, right?
I would imagine it's millions.
$1 million per month, maybe.
Okay.
So when a company comes to me and says, we want to have you, who makes, as a company, $1 million a month, a show in which we will have a non-exclusive distribution, but takes the branding, then we're going to say, in 1 or 2 years, how much do we make on this show per month? Well, it's in excess of 400,000.
This was a new show. This was this show, right?
So there's a few caveats. This channel is my first channel. It's got 1.35 million subscribers. It used to be my biggest
1.38.
channel where I would routinely get half a
You
million to
lost
$1 million per
somebody.
video, or maybe like 600,000 per video on certain shows. And then we're talking about doing a show like this where you'll get, you have 1 million, 1.5 subscribers. I've got 1 million plus subscribers, or with the other channels, it's big names coming, doing these debates tends to attract a lot of sponsorship. So
You had any other deals like this?
yes.
Oh, you have had other deals like this.
So
Because I seem to remember you saying to Emma that you had not, that it was just all from members, or you didn't have any backing.
sponsors. There's no backers, right? It's,
Well, a license deal is not a sponsorship. Like, I mean, I have
It's
sponsors.
sales. What
Like
do
I
you
have, well, it's
No, that's semantics right there, bud.
different.
no one has
it's
come to
completely
this
different.
company. But let's clarify.
Hello
Let's-
Tushy comes and says we want to sell bidets.
here's the
I do
difference.
an ad, but I don't have a license.
No one has come to my companies, plural, and said, I will give you X in exchange for X in terms of the production of content or a stake in the company. We have no investors. We have no backing. We have sales.
Have you had other license deals like that? I'm not talking about a sponsor. Tenet Media was not a sponsor.
it was a non-exclusive distribution license.
Yeah, it was a license deal. Yeah. No, I get
And,
that.
so
have you had other license deals like that?
Yes. And so this is not,
With who? Was it another? I mean, I'm just curious.
well, I got to wait because some of these deals are still in contract negotiations, so I can't.
Oh, so you didn't have any prior to the Tenet? Or you did?
I have licensed content to big networks. We have explicitly, and on a low scale.
So prior to this, you had licensed it to other big networks?
I'm confused. I have licensed.
What's confusing? He's asking if you've licensed your show to anybody else for that type of money. It's you're kind of doing the like, well, I mean, we got pots of the fire now, but I can't really disclose too much.
Licensed my content to other big networks.
Prior to the Tenet deal?
Yes.
Oh,
And we also.
what were those networks?
So like Nat Geo and Discovery when they hired me for content.
No,
or
I'm talking
content.
about these shows. I'm not talking about when you were, I'm talking about, the whole Timcast world.
Before Tenet, there were 3 negotiations currently taking place. And I can't say too much because I can't violate other contracts. Offers were made.
You're not supposed to tell who you're licensing to?
When you are in contract negotiations, first, you don't go out and just say, hey, guess what this company's offering me right now.
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm not asking what you're in negotiations for
not
the
now.
future.
He's
I'm
talking
saying
about-
prior
All right, so
to
let me
Tenet-
finish. Yes.
Prior to Tenet Media,
Okay.
had you had any other license deals?
License deals presented that were comparable and one was chosen.
Okay, so
And some are ongoing.
so you never had any other deals. People had proposed them to you, but you'd never
with
signed
higher
a deal.
rates. We were offered more money from other companies.
And you went with Tenet
Yes.
for a license deal.
I was offered a license agreement for comparable. I try to keep it vague, I guess, because
So just to be clear, you never signed another deal before Tenet. You had never had a license deal prior to that as Timcast.
No. Okay, look. Yes, I did. I said it like 5 times now.
Oh,
I've licensed content to a ton of networks.
Oh, I was just curious as to what networks those were. I don't know why you're getting so upset.
Because I've said it 5 times. You keep asking the same question over and over again.
You said Nat Geo. And,
So I've licensed content to like Discovery, Nat Geo, and then there's media buyers who
but
do
not
general-
as Timcast. Not like
yes, just quite literally as Timcast from this channel.
Oh, really? To Nat Geo? Okay.
Yes, and I've even appeared on their networks. So I can say it a million times. We were dealing with negotiations. We give the deal to our lawyers. Our lawyers come back and say, looks good. And then we start, the show already existed.
Yeah, no, I never thought that you, were in the bag for, well, I mean, I never thought they were telling you what to do. I just thought it was,
No, Dave Rubin, we know what he was doing, but even like Sam, they've been very charitable to Tim. I've been charitable to Tim with this one. Yes, I make the rubles jokes, but for real, I really do not think that I think he's telling the truth.
a lot of money to be getting, and not asking who, Gerard Depardieu was or whatever the guy's name, Gregorian.
Edward
the
Gregorian.
issue I think is worthy of clarification is like you yourself make 6 figures a month on your show.
Well, that's our revenue of the show. I don't make that.
Right, the revenue of this show and otherwise like $1 million doesn't go in my pocket every month, but we have staff and we have employees. And so it's around there. So when a company comes, and we had several, and they say, this is huge. We had a $30 million.
Are you back in negotiations with those people?
Yes.
I would imagine.
Especially considering...
It feels like you've had to... Like, what was this whole thing? Were you shutting down the show? Or
That's exactly what I was going to say, right? Like, I can't be the CEO, the principal talent, and a dad. It's already difficult to do.
Maybe I'm not such a bad businessman.
Maybe you're a good dad.
I got 2 kids, and but whatever. That's it.
Well, so like I've got to record 4 shows today. And that's an impossibility with a kid. So that's why like last week I'm like, I can keep doing the morning show because that will keep me occupied.
You shut down your news operation too, didn't you?
Scanner is still in operation, but it's like
didn't you have like a news like a website or something?
Yeah, we still do. And so there was we did Timcast News for a while, and then we had another company called Scanner that we were trying to get off the ground, and it's still there, but we're in a holding pattern. Content is still being produced for Scanner, but we have to figure out, like, here's the reality, man. News articles, the news media is a very, very difficult thing to monetize.
Very tough. Very tough.
You can write articles all day and night. You can send reporters on the ground, which we do, and then figuring out how to make that sustainable is incredibly difficult. And it gets to the point where, we can't. But I will say, in regards to what happened Monday, last week, so one of the offers we got was $30 million. And it comes with caveats. And so we go to these other companies and say, what are your terms? What are your offers? What are your terms? What are your offers? And then ultimately Tenet we were like, we'll go with them. That's whatever. We go to our lawyer goes through it. We say, all right.
Tenet didn't pay $30 million.
No.
It sounds like they paid half the amount. I mean, if you're Dave Rubin, what do you think about that? Like, I mean, if you're Dave Rubin and somebody says, we're going to give you $100,000 a video, doesn't that like make you go like, what's up with this?
Okay. So because this is 3 hours long, I am going to call this one right here. Because this is literally the halfway point. We got an hour and a half and then we got an hour and a half. So I figured, why not? This will be fun. I'm thinking the back half I might do something. I don't know. We'll see. I'll have it available. I plan on releasing these pretty much consecutively. So if you are just wanting to go right into it, hey, you can. If you want to wait a little bit, you can. So at that point, leave a like, comment. Specifically, I actually do want to know if you're a Tim listener or if you're a Majority Report listener and what you guys think about this so far. I really do want to know what you guys think because my assessment is that this is one of the better debates that I've seen. It's kind of weird where, like, for how much they crap on Tim Pool, this is very cordial. It almost seems like they're borderline friendly. So, and I'm actually really, really enjoying it. It's a little bit better than when you just get the shouting matches, but then again, those are the ones that tend to be more fun. So, but yeah, if you enjoyed this content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000. I also have super thanks and memberships available. If you want to support me financially, that'd be awesome. But regardless, I appreciate you guys being here and I'll see you in the next one.